still kind of, I feel like I'm still starting really with sound. I grew up listening to my mum and dad's records like everybody else, and my dad was a big Bob Dylan fan. They listened to things like the Stones and Jimi Hendrix, and I still love all that stuff. In fact, I'm rediscovering a lot of the Beatles now because I kind of blotted the Beatles out because it was such a big presence, right, in music that I kind of. And actually, I'm discovering a lot of things now that are kind of deemed as classics, but I just never listened to them. And I always kind of went for different things, and now I'm discovering, I guess, more well-known things for the first time, things like Led Zeppelin, you know, I'm really listening to a lot now, and, you know, that kind of thing. I mean, in a taxi the other day, I was listening to one of their albums, I think, for the first time. So, you know, but yeah, I grew up listening to, I guess, that kind of music, Brazilian music too. When I was a teenager, I was really into hip-hop, blues as well, but hip-hop mainly. And then I listened to a bit of jazz because blues kind of, you know, got me into jazz a little bit, and then drum and bass, which I've been a big fan of ever since. I started making music when I discovered the sampler, because up until then it was just for fun. I was playing instruments, like jamming in bands, but I never really took it that seriously. It was just for fun. But yeah, when I found the sampler, like I was saying before, it made sense to me. For the first time, I felt like I could do something that was relevant. I started off with the idea of trying to take really sort of organic sounds and put them in a really digital environment, because that's what excited me about sampling when I first got into it as well, was that you could use things that sounded very real but treat them in a very sort of hyper-real way. I don't know what the best word to describe it is, but in a way that is unnatural. And I thought that was really exciting at the time, to take, for instance, like a walking bass and to try and make it do things that a walking bass couldn't really do, but you still recognize the sound. It's just doing bizarre things, you know. And the same with drums, like to take drums and make them do things that are slightly, you know, they're not really human. So yeah, this is where I started, but you can't really get away with that anymore, you know. The novelty of using samples in that way, I think, has worn off, and I think now really I have to go a bit deeper in and to try and explore it a bit further. Traveling is something I like to do, but I'm not sure how much it has to do with the music I make, but it's definitely something that I enjoy, and I think has been really valuable. I've moved around a lot throughout my life, so I've lived in lots of different places, from Brazil to, I lived in Amsterdam when I was really young, Morocco and England, and now in Montreal in Canada. But it's become, I guess, natural really. I don't really think of it as like a big move. I'm quite lucky because what I do, I can pretty much do it anywhere. I'd like to spend more time in Brazil actually. I haven't been there for a long time now, and it'd be great to go back there. There was a show I played with Kid Koala in Johannesburg, and it was an old prison. It was converted. It used to be a prison, and they had some very famous inmates. But as a kind of sort of celebration of the end of apartheid, they made this prison a kind of a venue for the night, and we were playing in a courtyard, and everybody was in there, and then it started raining in the middle of the set, and it was just one of these sort of slightly magical moments where I was a bit freaked out because there was rain on the decks, and it's electronic, and but then these beautiful women appeared, like these with umbrellas suddenly, and it was just all very surreal and kind of cool. It stuck in my mind. It was quite intimidating meeting the Kronos Quartet because, I was aware that they're pretty heavy musicians, and I was trying to get them to do really basic things that they were way overqualified to do. So I showed up at their studio with some little things I'd written on a synthesizer the night before, and I'd watched them practice for about an hour before we even started, and they were doing the most advanced shit. It was just crazy, and so when it came to me playing, I was pretty sort of shy about it. But they were so cool. They were so sort of down to earth, and they were excited to do things that they hadn't done before. Like, they're very classically trained, obviously, so they don't really improvise, and so getting them to improvise was kind of exciting for them, in the same way that for me going out with mics was exciting for me. So I really got on with them all, really. I was talking to David Harrington we were talking about maybe going out to India at some point and tracking down R.D. Burman's collection of untapped vinyl, because apparently there's a studio somewhere in India with all of R.D. Burman's unrecorded music, and David Harrington's a big fan as well. So, we definitely clicked on some levels. the Splinter Cell collaboration was more, it was more a challenge to try and make the music interactive, because that was the thing about it. It's a game, so you have to be able to move between different layers of tension, and so the challenge for me was to try and make a piece of music that that could move freely from, you know, from a sort of stealthy feeling to a slightly tense feeling to a, you know, nervous, and then to a feeling of panic, and then back again at any moment, depending on what the player did. So yeah, it was cool to work inside a structure like that. It was really interesting. The availability of technology now, you know, obviously everyone has access to a lot more of a finished sort of sound now, you know. Everyone has access to samplers and cheap software that can make your sound very professional and finished. But I don't think that necessarily gives you an advantage. It just means that you can make something sound very polished, but it doesn't really mean that it has a musical worth. It's just another tool, right? So I really think it's always going to be made by people in the end. And all these toys we've got, all these bits of technology, they're tools, but they don't solve our problems. I think we need to have an idea. We need to have some sort of passion for the music. Something to say, I don't know, you know, anything, but it comes from the people, I think. And you can have the most amazing studio in the world and make the most tepid nonsense, right? So, or you can have just a very basic piece of kit and make something really interesting. And so really, I think it's, yeah, the person driving